You know, in history, sometimes a transformation happens so fast it almost defies explanation. It can completely reshape the world in just a few generations. Today, we're diving into one of the most remarkable of them all, the story of how an empire of faith became a global powerhouse of knowledge. We're talking about the rise of the early Islamic civilization. And it's a story you might think you know, but the sheer speed and the incredible scale of its emergence, I mean, from the deserts of Arabia to a world-spanning dynasty, it's just mind-blowing every time you look at it. Just take a look at this map. This darkest area here, that shows the empire around the time of the Prophet Muhammad, about 632 AD. Now, look at the lighter shades. That's the expansion by 750 AD. We're talking just over 100 years. It created this massive, unified world connecting all these different cultures and economies in a way that had never, ever been done before. So that brings us to the big question, right? Because military and political success, that's one thing. But how did this new empire also become an intellectual superpower? What were the key ingredients that ignited this golden age of science and discovery? Well, the answer, it seems, begins not with swords or with gold, but with a powerful and, frankly, revolutionary new idea about knowledge itself. It was a fundamental shift in mindset that laid the groundwork for everything that was to come. At the very heart of this whole revolution was one single, powerful command: Iqra. It means read. And this wasn't just a suggestion, this was the very first word of divine revelation in Islam. The Quran itself has more than 750 verses that actively encourage people to think, to reflect, and to use their reason to understand the world around them. And that initial command, read, it rippled outwards, becoming this incredible principle for the whole society. Teachings like this one totally transformed the pursuit of knowledge. It went from being something just for a tiny, wealthy elite to being a religious duty, a lifelong obligation for every single person, man or woman, from the cradle to the grave. So what you get from this is a really unique intellectual culture. There was this radical openness to learning from others. They were actively seeking out and translating the great works of the Greeks, the Persians, the Indians, not just to copy them, but to critique them and to build on them. This was combined with a real spirit of critical thinking that encouraged reason over superstition. And it was seen as a joint endeavor, a project for all of humanity, with scholars of different faiths and backgrounds all working together. Okay, so you have this incredible mindset, but an idea, even a powerful one, isn't enough on its own, right? You need to build an entire infrastructure to actually support it. So how did they turn this powerful idea into a practical reality? This chart here is a fantastic roadmap for how it all worked. You see the golden age up at the top, and right below it are the pillars holding it up. We just talked about that intellectual mindset at the very foundation, so now let's explore these other key pillars that made it all possible. First up, the Waqf system. Now this was a true stroke of genius, a real social innovation. It was basically a system of charitable endowments. People could donate money or property to fund things like schools, libraries, and hospitals forever. This created stable, long-term, and independent funding for education and research on a massive scale. Think of it like a decentralized, community-driven crowdfunding platform for advancing knowledge. And then, paper. Now, it sounds simple to us, but you have to understand, this was the information technology revolution of its day, no question. Once they learned the secrets of papermaking, the technology just spread like wildfire. And all of a sudden, books weren't these insanely expensive manuscripts anymore. Cheap, abundant paper fueled this massive boom in libraries, bookshops, and literacy. It changed everything. And of course, you absolutely cannot forget the role of leadership. Many of the early caliphs and rulers were highly educated people themselves. They got it. They saw the value in knowledge and became incredible patrons, pouring money into massive projects like the legendary House of Wisdom in Baghdad, a library, a translation hub, and a research center that became a magnet for the greatest minds from all over the known world. So, you've got the mindset, the institutions, and the technology. What happens when you put all of that together? Well, you get an absolute explosion of discovery that would go on to shape the entire course of human history. Let's just take medicine, for example. You have giants like El-Razi, who was the first physician to ever clinically tell the difference between smallpox and measles. You've got Ibn Sina, or Avicenna in the West, whose book The Canon of Medicine was the standard medical textbook in Europe for 500 years. And get this, centuries before it was understood in Europe, Ibn al-Nafis correctly described how blood circulates through the lungs.
And the list just goes on and on. They developed algebra into the powerful tool we know today. In fact, the word we use every single day, algorithm, yep, that comes from the name of the scholar Al-Khwarizmi. You had inventors like Al-Jazari creating these incredible automated machines that were basically the forerunners of modern robotics, and astronomers were mapping the stars with a precision that was just unmatched for centuries.
And this wasn't just about one or two fields. This spirit of inquiry, it was everywhere. Jabir ibn Hayyan is often called the father of chemistry because he introduced a systematic experimental approach to science. And it wasn't just the hard sciences either. Scholars made huge leaps in social sciences like historiography, developing really rigorous methods for checking and evaluating historical sources. Okay, so let's pull back for a second. What does all of this actually mean for the bigger story of human knowledge? It means we have to see this era not as some isolated chapter, but as an absolutely essential link in the global chain of discovery. See, this huge body of knowledge, both the ancient Greek texts they saved and all of their own incredible new discoveries, it didn't just disappear. It flowed into Europe through places like Spain and Italy, and it helped spark the curiosity and the learning that would eventually lead to the Renaissance and Europe's own scientific revolution. It wasn't a baton pass, it was a continuous chain of inquiry. And this is the main thing I really want you to take away from all this. The Islamic Golden Age wasn't some passive library that just held on to old books. It was an active, dynamic laboratory. These scholars were constantly questioning, testing, experimenting, and putting ideas together to create something brand new. They didn't just preserve knowledge, they transformed it. And that leaves us with a pretty fascinating final thought. The story of science is so often told as this straight line from ancient Greece to Renaissance Europe. But when we add this vibrant, multicultural, and absolutely essential chapter back into the narrative, well, it changes the entire picture, doesn't it? It forces us to ask, what happens when we rethink who gets to be a pioneer in our history books? It really makes you wonder, what else don't we know about our own story?